Hello ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here, and welcome back to Elite Dangerous. Now today we're going to be taking a look at a bit of bounty hunting, because I think this is going to be something that people want to know a little bit about. Mainly because, out of all the possible ways you can earn credits in this game, bounty hunting is one very viable option, but there are a few things that you need to know about it before you get started. Obviously, the ship you use, the outfitting you have, the equipment you mount, and the types of targets you go after are very important to whether or not your bounty hunting is going to be profitable or not. Now, what you're doing as a bounty hunter, you're basically supplementing the system authority vessels, and you are chasing down wanted criminals. That's the gist of it. And you can do this in any system, for the most part. I would assume the more lawless a system is, for example, if it's an anarchy system with not high security ratings, in other words, you're not seeing a lot of system authority ships around, you're more likely to have wanted criminals around. Or, at least that's my assumption anyway. I have noticed less wanted criminals flying around in high security space, such as around Sol, for example. I've been around Earth and that, and doesn't seem to be a lot of wanted criminals there. But the system I'm in right now, which is LHS 3447, does have some of that. So I'm going to go through, firstly, the outfitting. Now, what I have here is my Eagle. This is probably the most maneuverable of all the, I would say, fighter class ships that you can get. The others being the Sidewinder, the Cobra, the Viper. These are all viable options as well, and they all vary in price and statistics. Now, the Eagle is not the fastest, so it has to rely more on its maneuverability, and a good amount of shielding as well, because it doesn't have a lot of hull integrity or armor. So, first things first, I'm going to go through the weapons that I'm using, because these are quite important. I'm using two fixed-mounted multi-cannons on the lower hardpoints, and a missile rack on the upper hardpoint. Now, you can use any combination of weapons that you want, but the thing that you want to be aware of is the ammo consumption and the ammo cost. For multi-cannons themselves, the credit costs for ammunition isn't particularly high, but you don't want to be, I suppose, wasting a lot of ammunition against something that's only worth 1,000 credits or so. So you want to kind of conserve your ammo and be as accurate as possible. Now, there are gimbaled versions of these available, denoted by these crosses that you can see here. These are gimbaled mounts, and anything with a crosshair like this is a fixed-mounted weapon. Of course, mining lasers aren't actually weapons, so don't try to use those. They might not be as effective. Anyway, so if ammo cost is going to be a concern for you, or if you're going out for extended periods of time and you're not going to have enough chance to rearm, going for an energy-based weapon such as a laser might be a more viable option. So, in this case, pulse lasers are the basic weapons that you start off with. In fact, most ships rather, that you purchase will come with a pulse laser on a fixed mount. These are loaned and they're usually low quality, so unless you have no other option, you can kind of stick with those, but I wouldn't recommend staying with them for too long. Burst lasers do a little bit more damage than the standard pulse laser, but they fire in bursts instead of a constant pulse. So in this case, you'd want to be a little bit more accurate. They do have a little bit of delay on firing as well, so you want to kind of place your shots a little bit more accurately. And then, of course, beam lasers, but these don't seem to be available. There they are. Beam lasers, these are continuous fire. So instead of the pulse, which lets off one single pulse and then stops, a continuous fire beam laser will continue firing until it overheats. So these could be useful against larger targets that you can kind of keep your crosshairs on for longer, or something that you need a sustained fire against. But as far as I can tell, beam lasers do the least amount of damage over time. So I could be wrong on that, but I believe they have less damage per second anyway than the other lasers do, but don't quote me on that. In general, gimbaled weapons do have less damage than a fixed mounted weapon, but they do have a similar power draw, as far as I can tell. It's hard to really compare them. Okay, so we have a burst laser over here, which is on a gimbaled mount, and you can see, compared with the burst laser over here, the fixed mounted one uses more power, but they also do a little bit more damage. It's hard to tell with just the bars, but they generally do just a slightly greater amount of damage on a fixed mount. That's something to do with the caliber or something, like the gun is actually bigger because, you know, it's a fixed mount versus a gimbaled mount. As for turreted weapons, which I can't seem to find any at these stations, but they have a little turret icon next to the name. Now those are the smallest of the weapons, but they do have the ability to fire backwards. So if you're not in a maneuverable ship, you might want to consider using those instead. But for the most part, for fighters, this isn't much of an issue. If you have a bit of difficulty aiming, a gimbaled mount might be more your thing. Just be aware they do have a mind of their own, so they do kind of overshoot the target if it's maneuvering a lot, so a fixed mount might be more your thing. Overall, it comes down to your personal preference, but as for ammo consumption, generally you want to keep it to cheap ammo so that you can kind of conserve your costs, or cut costs as much as possible to make your bounty hunting profitable. So I'm using a missile rack that is mounted with... I can actually show you. Oops. I can actually show you this here. Now this missile rack that I'm using is a B rating dumbfire. And the reason I'm using that is because the missiles themselves are not particularly expensive, but they do provide extra punch when you need it. And the explosive damage is more or less average against shields and against armor. Now, that does actually matter because... I'm going to keep pressing that. Because when it comes to the type of damage that they do, for example, energy weapons do a thermic damage, these are actually more effective against shields, whereas kinetic damage, for example, that done by... for example, the cannon, is more effective against armor, and you can see it has a much higher armor penetration rating. A railgun, for example, is good against both, but these are really expensive to run. They cost a lot, and they also are quite expensive per shot. So you got to really make your shots count. So overall, these are the weapons anyway. Now the next thing you want to talk about is equipments. Now, equipments themselves are particularly important for bounty hunting. For example, a kill warrant scanner. Now these things are relatively cheap, actually. The one that I have mounted right now is not available here, but it's a really low grade one. It's an E grade one, which is quite cheap, but these will help you to maximize your profits. So if you have, if you are running a fighter, for example, and you're chasing down a target, chances are they have bounties in other systems as well, or under different factions. For example, if they're in Federation space, they might have an Empire bounty as well. So, in order to not miss out on those extra bounties, you want to scan them with a kill warrant scanner, so that you can get more cash out of it. Now, this takes a bit of time. The typical kill warrant scanner will take about 10 seconds to scan. Now, the higher grade you go, they generally have better scan range. Now the one I'm using can target something 2 kilometers out, but of course if you go much higher than that you can go up to 4 kilometers, which is beyond most weapon ranges actually, so you can actually scan them before you start getting into engagement range with them. So that's particularly important. So having a good quality one of those would be useful, but it's not entirely crucial. You don't need it for bounty hunting, but it would help to have that. It would help definitely get you more money. The next thing, and this is really important, you want a frame shift interdictor. Now, frame shift interdictors, basically what they do is they establish a tether between you and your target when you're in supercruise. And the reason for this is because most of the high value targets that you find flying around will be in supercruise, and you want to bring them back into normal space so you can engage them and destroy them. So the frame shift interdictor, now these are a little bit pricey, but they will help you will be the only means by which you can pull them out of supercruise in order to engage them. So you definitely need to get that. And you need to get good at using it too. You can't just put it on and hope for the best. You need to be very good at doing it too. So that's it really. The rest of it, cargo rack, I have one, but you don't really need that per se. The rest of it, I've modified this Eagle extensively, so you can actually see I've got more power than the default, and I've got more jump range, so I have upgraded it somewhat. But for the most part, you definitely do want to have that frame shift interdictor. Power distributor, you'd probably want to upgrade that if you're using a lot of energy weapons like beam lasers, and therefore because they help with your weapon cooling, and they help you with your weapon recharge rate as well. So those are all good to have. Now the next thing about bounty hunting is that there are a couple of ways you can do it. Sometimes they appear in the bulletin board. A particular targeted type of enemy might appear for you to take down. Now these are generally worth a lot, but they are more difficult to find, and you might spend a few hours doing that. So it's good to pick one up, so in the odd chance that you do find, you do encounter a wanted criminal, a named criminal rather, you have the chance of getting that bounty. But if you don't have one, it's also fine. You can just launch and go out hunting, essentially. Now when I say hunting, I mean hunting in the literal sense, and we're going to see that in just a moment. Alright, so now we're in Super Cruise and flying around the system, and as you can see right here on my sensors, there are a bunch of ships flying around. Now of course anything that is hollow is a player, and anything that is solid is an NPC, and they all come in different colors and whatnot as well. So with these, you can actually find a particular target. Now, these are all the ships that are flying around. These are not just wanted criminals. So when I say hunting, it really is hunting in a literal sense, because you have to hunt them. Okay, so first thing you want to do is pull up your left-handed menu. So that's where your navigation and all that is. And here you have a list of contacts. Now, be aware of where you're flying. You don't want to fly into anything while you're doing this. And here you can have a look at one. So we're going to select this asp over here and see, and then we bring him into our view so that we can scan him. And from the looks of it, he's clean. You can see over there in the bottom left, he's actually clean. So he's not a wanted criminal. But if we were to interdict him and scan him with our kill warrant scanner, you may find he's wanted in other systems. But in this system, shooting at him might give you a bounty of some sort, because he's not actually a wanted criminal here. So you want to be aware of that. Also, these will also reveal names of the NPCs, which can be quite amusing sometimes. So we're going to scan this Cobra over here. He's also clean. Now, this could take some time, and you want to scan nearly every single one that you see, because, well, any one of these could be a wanted criminal. It could be any ship that you can see. It could even be this Orca over here, which is typically just a passenger liner, but it could even be that. The things that are typically not wanted are Federal Security Service ships, like these Anacondas up here. Not that you want to take on an Anaconda and an Eagle, but it's definitely something that does sometimes happen. So this is most of what you would do. You just spend most of your time flying around, selecting targets, and scanning them to see if they are wanted. Now, the one thing that... Oh, we're being interdicted now. Okay, so I'm going to actually submit to this in the hopes that we are actually being interdicted by a wanted criminal. You can submit to an interdiction by hitting X, or simply zeroing your throttle, and that will submit you. And the advantage of doing so, it looks like we have a wanted criminal on us, is it doesn't give you that tumbling effect that you normally get when you're interdicted, and it doesn't overheat you immediately. Alright, so he is actually engaging us right now. So we're going to bring up our weapons. Now we don't have time to scan him because he's already engaging us, so we want to just go on the offensive. So deploy the weapons, and let's go. Now one thing I do want to point out at this time is that you can actually see how much a target is worth before interdicting them by going into the contacts menu and looking at the detail here. So we can see right there on the bottom right, this is a criminal that's wanted for 5,800 credits. So he's definitely not going to go down without a fight. He's clearly a very dangerous individual. So hopefully we can take him down. He is firing missiles at us. And he's also using beam lasers, so we want to keep our weapons up as much as possible. As you can tell, dogfighting is going to be a little bit difficult while commentating at the same time, but we will do our best. Now I'm using ammunition-based weapons, but if you were somebody who's using energy-based weapons, you want to keep an eye on your heat level. Now you can actually maximize the amount of time you can spend firing those weapons by putting more power into your weapons using your power distributor, but you can do that by hitting the right arrow key, and that will actually divert more power from the reactor to the power systems, the weapon systems rather. And that will actually allow you to fire those weapons for longer. It doesn't actually matter so much for ammunition-based weapons. I'm not sure if it affects the reload time on that, but it definitely affects energy weapons a lot more. So you want to keep an eye on that. Now, if you're using ammunition-based weapons, projectile weapons for that matter, you can see there are several circles in front of me. Now, the two dots below my cursor are actually the multi-cannons. Now, the position of the weapons makes a difference because they have firing arcs. Now, fixed weapons can rotate very slightly, but you do not want to rely on that too much. So they can actually rotate just a little bit. But they cannot hit anything above the aircraft's nose, or spacecraft's nose rather. This ship has I would say a feature, or some people might call a disadvantage, in that the two main hard points are actually below the nose, and then there's one hard point above the nose, or on the spine of the aircraft. And what that means is that anything above can only hit in an arc above the ship, and anything below can only hit in an arc below the ship. So you have to be aware of what you've mounted on each surface so that you can maximize what you're doing. So in this case, having the two multi-cannons below is serving me quite well because I know how to work with them, but you may want to set it up slightly differently. Now, one main thing that you want to be aware of is to conserve your ammo as much as possible if you are using something like multi-cannons, because even with a high value target you do not want to use too much ammunition, or it's just going to cost you too much money and not be worth your time. In some cases you may not even want to engage a target at all because you're not outfitted to take him down. In some cases you may see things like anacondas or pythons are wanted, and these things can be very dangerous, so you may not want to engage them at all. At the same time, if you see a Sidewinder that's only worth about 500 credits, it may not be worth taking him on if you only have ammunition-based weapons, because it's frankly not going to profit you much and may not be worth your time at all. So as you can see here in the Eagle, you want to keep turning as much as possible, and this NPC is actually doing a decent job of it. He's making sure that he's out of the line of fire as much as possible, and I'm actually having a good kind of fight here, trying to keep him in my sights, also without crashing into him. You got to remember the Eagle is a very fragile ship, so turning is especially important, and aside from that you also want to make sure that you do not collide, because you may not survive the collision. Okay, so we successfully took down the target, and you can see there at the top right, we have claimed our bounty. And that's really it. When you see... Let's just retract the weapons here. If you kill the target, you go into your transactions, and you can see there we have a bounty to claim. Now this bounty is actually 1,500 in Empire. I don't think it's actually updated correctly, because that's not the full bounty. There we go, so now we can see that we have a total of 5,800 credits to claim in the Federation. I think the Empire bounty might be for something else. But that's basically it. So now what we can do is we can go to any station that's within Federation space and claim that bounty. Of course the factions do matter. if you are in Empire space, you're not likely to find a contact that will let you claim a Federation bounty. That is not likely to happen. So being aware of the faction space that you're in does help. So in this case, that Empire bounty might not be something I can claim very quickly. So last thing before we wrap up here is I'm going to go into the station and show you exactly how to go about claiming your bounties. So we'll lock our destination to Wallage Terminal, and I'll see you in a moment. Alright, so now we're back at Wallage Terminal, and the first thing you want to do when you get back is go into Starport Services, and then you want to find a tab called Contacts, and under Contacts you can actually go from here, and there are several things you can actually do here, but one of the things you can do is claim your bounties. So under the local security office, and you'll see right here, there are bounties here, and you can redeem those bounties for your credits. So in this case, we've got 5,800 credits to claim under Federation, and as you can see here, this terminal is under Federation governance, or under Federation control, so we can claim a Federation bounty. But you can see we still have an Empire bounty, and that's not available here. So in order to do that, we'd have to go to Empire space and claim it there. So that's the kind of limitation that you have when bounty hunting, and these can happen when you use your kill warrant scanner as well, as sometimes you get Empire bounties or Alliance bounties or whatsoever for different factions, and those things are only claimable under those factions. So it's one thing to bear in mind when you're actually doing any sort of bounty hunting, is that you want to be aware of which system you're in and where those bounties may come from. Typically, the bounty that is on the head of the criminal in that system that you're in is from the faction that's controlling that system. That's typically the case. In some cases, you may be in Federation space or Empire space, and you may encounter a system that is actually under independent control, but those criminals may be wanted by either the nearest faction or maybe under a local faction. So you want to check by going into your left-hand menu over here and checking which space it's actually in. So from there, then you'll know whether you can claim it or not. So we can go ahead and claim it here, and you can see our balance has just been updated with that. Now, if you want to be aware of just how much profit you're actually making, you want to be aware of how much you're paying to refuel, repair, and reload. As much as possible, you don't want to be repairing at all. If you're playing it safe and you've kept your shields up, you shouldn't need to repair very much at all. But it's where the ammunition is concerned is where you're going to be using most of your money. By going into munitions, you can see exactly how much everything is costing. So I used 3 missiles on that Eagle earlier, and that's actually added up to, we just added up here, it's 750 credits. So that's not too bad. Considering it's a 5,000 credit bounty, that's not too bad. So we've actually made 4,000 credits from that one kill. Or rather 4,000 or more credits from that one kill. And this is something that you want to keep in mind. Always be aware of how much your ammo costs and what you can expect to use. So example, if you see a Sidewinder that's only worth 500 credits, don't go and use 2 missiles on him, because that's going to negate any profit that you're going to have anyway. You may find yourself losing money in the end. So if we resupply this, we can see we're still in profits. It takes a bit of getting used to, but eventually you'll get the hang of it. And that's all there really is to it. Do you have any questions, or if you want to ask me anything at all about Elite Dangerous, leave your question down in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like, and thank you very much for watching. My name is Panzer, and I'll see you next time.